all, thanks everyone for coming today to listen to three of us talk. So I think what we're going to do to get started is we're just going to go around very quickly and each of us introduce ourselves, like our name, and then most importantly, just say a little bit about how much DMing experience you have. Doesn't need to be within 5E, doesn't even need to be within D&D. Just talk a little bit about your experience with DMing. So we'll start first. My name is Sean. I am a relatively new DM. So I've done a bit of Adventurous League recently. So what I'm going to talk about, my topic for today is transitioning from a player to a DM and some of the experiences I've learned. And hopefully I can share some of these such that some of you might be encouraged to DM as well. Aaron?
Yes. Guys, hi. My name is Teron. I'm also quite a new DM. Mainly been DMing AL stuff. Started around less than a year ago, and from there I've just been trying to learn everything as I can. Okay, Marius, you go first.
My name is Marion. I've been DMing for almost 2 years. This coming Wednesday or something. I don't remember. But yeah, I started from homebrew. I've been DMing ever since. I was never really a player, so I mostly DM. But only recently I started Adventurous League. I found some of my players, and it became a DM. So, yeah. And I still, yeah, even after almost 2 years, I still don't know a lot of things. So expect a lot of stuttering, like even now. So, yeah.
All right, shall we then go around? Do you want to start this side, please?
Hi, I'm Alvin. I've played D&D for like about 2 years, and yeah, then DM for about 1 year plus or so. So it's just like a very very weekly thing that I do with some of my good friends. Yeah, so.
Hey, next.
My name is Pawas. I've been playing D&D since 2 years already. Yeah, most of the time I play homebrew DM. I started DM before I become a player.
Another one
I
for the
know
couch.
much of the rules before I play, then I realized that there are rules to play with. So yeah, that's all.
Hi, I'm Steve. I started GMing in 2012. After a stint with a GM that was quite unpleasant, so I decided that I wanted to be a GM. Since then, I GM every week for until now. Nowadays, I run more games. So that's about it.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Andy. I started my experience in role-playing games. Started in Dungeons and Dragons 3.5. Then after it went on to 4th Ed, and now I'm playing Pathfinder. So I found out about this through Facebook. So I was like, you never stop learning as a GM. So that's why I'm here.
That's it. Sean. Started D&D for about a month. DM experience close to zero. Right?
I think we started together just probably a month less than slightly. Never DMs, but I just want to learn.
Okay.
Yeah, started together, didn't GM much. Alright. Friends, started together as well. Zero DM experience.
Oh. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I've been playing since Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But I haven't DM'd much. Did one campaign, and I'd like to learn more about running a successful, long-standing campaign and telling the whole story.
I'm Felice. I started my DMing one shot to get a few of my friends into D&D. Yeah, so that's it.
I'm Kelvin. I started in 5. Stopped playing for quite a while. I started again this year with 5E. I have no DMing experience at all, but I'm interested in starting out.
Okay, I'm Ivan. I have been playing D&D since maybe like Sec 1 or something, long as time ago, back So I started off as a player. Eventually, it became the point where everyone has scheduling issue, and then I was like, you know what, screw it, I'll just be a DM. And from there on, I've been DMing a bit off and on from 3.5 to 3.5. I also dabbled a bit in other kinds of games, more Youngers, Sion, ESM, anime-based games, like Alpha Game, right? And other than that,
my name is Charles. I started DMing 3.3 back in China ever since. Then after that, I touched on a little bit on Focus and I start playing 5E with AL. I KT for 2 days before, but very short.
Ah, okay.
Hi, I'm Jack. I started D&D, I started playing D&D 5 year ago. I started eventually in September. I have no experience in DMing, but that's why I'm here to learn.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hi, Gideon. I started playing D&D last month. Yeah, so I love DM.
Okay. Great. So I think what we're going to do, so just to give you an idea of how today's session is going to go, each of us is going to do a presentation on one topic, and of course, given that there's a very wide range of experiences and like needs or wants here, feel free to stop us at any point if you have any questions or thoughts you want to add. But at the end of each of our sections and at the end of everything, we're going to have a discussion. You can call it a Q&A lah, but given that we are not experts either, you can call it more of like a discussion so that everyone can share what thoughts you have which might be useful to the questions that each other has. Okay, so first I'm going to be talking about transitioning from a player to a DM and some of the experiences I had and try to answer some of the common questions that I hear when people ask, like people talk to me about DMing and whether or not how to get started. Then Darren will be talking about the difference between Homebrew and Adventurous League. And finally, Marion will be talking about table discipline and how to handle problematic players, which I'm sure you've all encountered at some point or another. Yeah, because Marion as a spec knows all about shouting at people. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, okay, so very quick question for those people who haven't DM'd before. Okay, so for those people, so it's the same question, but for those people who haven't DM'd before, I'd like you to think about why haven't you done it yet? For those people who have DM'd already and have experience doing it, I'd like you to cast your mind back to when you first started and ask yourself, what was the major difficulty or major obstacle that you had to overcome in order for you to start DMing? Because it's going to be different from a lot of different people. And here I'm going to give a few of the very, very common things that we hear. And so I'm going to flash all of them up, and then later we're going to see what people had the most common difficulties with. So based on my own ideas, I just categorize them into a few kind of things. So the first one, next, is the following. Okay, sorry, the text is a bit small. I didn't expect it to be this small. The first box says, I don't know enough about the rules of D&D to DM. So I don't feel confident because I'm afraid that if someone asks me, is this guy behind cover, I have to flip through the rulebook for 50 pages before I can find the correct thing, and I don't know what to look for. The second one is, I don't know enough about the world of D&D. I haven't read any of the novels. I haven't been playing since 2nd edition. Someone asked me who is Dritz. I don't know who the hell that is. That kind of thing. And the last one is, I'm not creative enough. I've never written a story before. I've never thought of a story before. I don't know how to be creative. I cannot come up with a story which people find interesting. So the second type, let me go to the next, is what I might call the social issues. The first one is people say, I feel very awkward DMing. I feel very awkward if I have to tell someone, you die. Or I tell someone you failed. Or tell someone you can't do that because that's really creepy and you shouldn't be doing that at the D&D table. And I'm not comfortable talking to people like that. Don't laugh. This is a very, very common thing, right? I'm sure many of us have been through that. Second one is, I don't know anyone who want to play a game with me. Maybe I'm the only person in my friend circle who plays D&D or who I know plays D&D. So even if I want to start a campaign, I don't know where to begin. Third kind is people will say, I don't have minis, I don't have maps, I don't have books, I don't have modules. People say, I want a player handbook or Dungeon Master's Guide. I don't have any of those. So I can't start because I don't have minis or dragons to put on the table. Or people say, I don't have time to prepare because I work from 8 o'clock to 9 p.m. every day and I just don't have the time to set aside to run a campaign or to regularly meet up with a group every week. And last one is just, I prefer playing. So this one is the opposite of people like Marion. Marion definitely prefers DMing. He's said this numerous times. But there are people who say, I definitely just prefer playing and I don't like DMing because of whatever reason. But this is not because they feel that they don't have any of the above. It's just what is more fun for them. That's not necessarily bad, but it's just something to be aware of. So looking at all this, right, I think we can categorize them into a few things. I just press the down key a few times. So is intelligence? Do you have charisma? Do you have GP at downtime? And what's your alignment? So I'm going to ask all of you to think a bit about this. And of course, this list isn't exhaustive. So then I'd like to ask everyone to maybe just raise your hands when we go through each of these and maybe just indicate if that was the thing, this was a problem that you faced, which was or is an obstacle to you DMing. Okay, so just take a moment to think about this. And feel free to raise any other obstacles that you have as well, which may not be included on this list. Okay, so who feels that they have a problem with regards to knowledge about D&D, whether it's the rules, the fiction, or like just not being creative enough? Anyone? Just feel free to raise your hand. I was one of, I had the issue as well. Like up to now, I still don't know most of the rules, but that's something we can overcome as we will see later. All right, who feels awkward doing it? Like feels awkward, doesn't know anyone else who wants to play? That's me as well, by the way. It's like, I also feel very scared to tell someone like, oh, you died. Fortunately, I haven't had to do that yet because... Okay, who feels that it's a big obstacle to them playing DMing is that they don't have resources like minis or maps? Okay, yeah, or downtime. They're very busy, no time. All right, and who feels like they definitely feel like they prefer playing and they're just not sure if DMing is fun enough for them to do it? Okay, sure. That's perfectly fine as well. I think it's nothing to be embarrassed about. But just to show everyone that there's a variety of reasons why people don't DM or haven't started DMing, and even for those people who have been DMing for very long, like from the self-introduction just now, you know that many people here have been DMing for a very long time. Many of us face the same kind of obstacles as well when we started. So these are things that can be overcome. And in today's session, I hope to address some of these concerns, and together we can try to figure out ways that we can help overcome these problems so that we can all start DMing and see if there's something that we want to do long-term in our D&D careers. Okay, next. All right, so quick tips, long list. All right, so these correspond roughly to the issues we mentioned earlier. So the first tip really is, okay, so by the way, just in terms of structure of this, we're going to go through this very quickly, and then we're going to do an exercise together. We're going to pull out one of the Adventurers League modules for City on the Edge, which is Tomb of Annihilation. We're going to pick 2 specific encounters from that module, and we're going to have a discussion about how we can customize the module in order to like use your own creative flair, meet your players' needs, etc. Okay? So first, thing is about understanding of players and what they want. So for those of us who have concerns about like mentioned earlier, feeling awkward, not knowing if this is something which your players find fun, really I think communication is really, really key. If you're worried that having to tell a player you died will piss them off, make them upset, I think the key really is to talk to them, talk to your group, and ensure that you have a good grasp of what your group wants, and your group has a good grasp of what you want as well. So what this means is that, for example, when you start a game like Tomb of Annihilation, which is known to be quite deadly, you want to talk to your group and ask them, is this something that you guys are okay with? You tell them it is a high likelihood that your characters will die in the campaign. It's a high likelihood that really dark and grim stuff will happen. Is that something you're okay with? And if they say that's not something they prefer, then it's always possible to change the adventure, change some of the things which happen in order to cater to their needs. But that two-way communication, I think, is the first and most important rule of DMing. Make sure that you are both, you as a DM and your players are talking to each other to meet each other's needs. Second is for those people who are afraid that you don't know about the rules. I think this is something that I discovered for myself, and this is something which a lot of established DMs have mentioned to me as well. Consistency and coherency is more important in a DM session than accuracy. What does this mean? This means that when someone asks you about rules, it is more important that you have a consistent sense of what happens and apply it fairly across the board than that your rules correspond exactly to what it says in the Adventurer's Guide or the Player's Handbook. So, let's say you are playing a game with someone and he says, I want to grapple my enemy. Perhaps off the top of my head, I can't remember what the rules for grappling, which is true. I don't remember the rules for grappling because grappling is not something which many people do very often. So what am I going to do? I have two choices now. One is I could flip through the Player's Handbook, looking for the place that the grappling rules are, and I could apply it. That is fine if you're not going to be too disruptive to the game by doing so, because some people feel it does disrupt the game. But the other thing I could do is I could just come up with something on the spot, which seems to make sense. I could just say, okay, let me think about it. Grappling, which involves me like just using my strength to try to like subdue someone, so I'm going to call that a contested strength check. You versus the target. Is it exactly what I said in the Player's Handbook? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Does it really matter? I'm going to hazard a guess. Probably doesn't really matter as long as you're fair and consistent in your applying of the rules. So, for example, and this applies as well to the way that you change and homebrew some of the rules yourself. So, for example, for myself and I know Marion as well, we both homebrew our rules for critical hits. So, in the standard Player's Handbook, it says that when you land a critical hit, you just roll twice the damage dice. So, if you're using a Great Axe, for example, it's a D12, you roll a critical hit, instead of rolling 1D12, you roll 2D12. But for myself and for Marion both, and I know this because Marion is the DM in one of our long-running campaigns, we both run a homebrew rule that if you land a crit, the first damage die is maximized. So if it's a D12, I just assume you've rolled a 12, and then you roll a second one on top of that. So a critical hit will always do more damage than a normal hit. Is that necessarily better than the previous rule? I don't know. There are pros and cons. There are reasons why I like it. But what it means when I say consistency is I apply this rule to the players, but I also apply this rule to the monsters, and I also apply this rule to the enemies. Likewise, for another rule I homebrew, it's about like advantage. Some DMs are very stingy with advantage. Again, this is not necessarily good or bad, it's just the way they do it. For me, I give advantage for anything and everything. If you can give me a coherent reason why the monster might be distracted from like concentrating on defending against you, I will give you advantage on the attack against them. Like even if in really, really weird cases like, I don't know, 2 people firing arrows at the same monster from like right angles to each other, other DMs might say that doesn't give you advantage because you're not like flanking him. I might say, well, I think the monster will be having a hard time deflecting arrows from 2 different directions. I'm going to give you advantage on that attack. But this applies also in reverse. If 2 monsters are firing arrows at you from 2 different directions, I'm going to give them advantage as well. So really the issue is about being consistent and building this world in which the players have a sense that things are fair and the dice are not stacked against them. And that I think is more important than accuracy. So again, to recap this part, if you are worried about rules, I think don't be too worried about being too accurate and conforming too heavily with what the player's handbook says. Worry more about making sure that as long as things are consistent and fair, that should be okay for your players. Third is, I think, something which is a bit of a unique issue, because this is something which some of us who like to think of ourselves as creative, is a trap that we commonly fall into. We don't like cliches, and this is actually both number 3 and number 4. So first, research very liberally. When I say research, I mean steal. I mean, like, go to your favorite movies, go to your favorite books, for those people who feel they're not creative enough, and just steal things which work. Like, yeah. So, and this relates to point number 3 as well. Don't be afraid of cliches. Like, you may think that the bad guy saying, "Oh, I am your father," is damn cliche, right? But there's a reason why cliches become cliches. The reason why they become mainstream, because they work, because they have a lot of resonance with a lot of people. And don't be afraid of using them. And this also means that you're going eventually to meet, or perhaps be that guy, or that girl, or that player generally, who has a character who is named Hanzo and is an archer, and I don't know, has a twin brother out there somewhere, right? Or you're going to be that rogue whose name is Naruto. You're going to be that player you're going to meet or be that player whose character is just a rip-off of some like pop culture thing. And that, again, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Let them do what they want. If there's something which appeals to them, again, as long as you communicate with them, I think that's fine. But in general, don't be afraid of ripping people off. Don't be afraid of ripping stories off. Use them as basis for yourself to build stories which you are comfortable with. Fifth, about getting players invested. This, again, if you're worried that you can't get your players invested enough. So something that I like to do personally is, if I have a group which I know are coming back. For example, for some AL modules, people will come back for session 1, 2, 3, and they will just keep coming back to you because they want to see the story out. So what I like to do is, once I have some understanding of who the players are and what their characters are, I try to write into the module some ways to hook them in. So easy ways to do that. Number 1 is backgrounds. So when you create a character, a lot of us have used the character backgrounds on the player's handbook because they cover a wide variety of options, they are easy to use. So what do I do? So for example, I know that one of my players has a background as a criminal. When I am reading the module in preparation for the week's game, I might ask myself, how might this criminal background come into play in this game? How might I offer them an advantage? How might I put them at a disadvantage? Perhaps it means that when they go around to the street, they see a sign in Thieves' Cant which gives them a clue about the mystery they're trying to solve. Perhaps it means that they have contacts in the town they can tap on. But there are ways to use all your different backgrounds and bring that in to help the players feel that they are invested in the story. I think that comes with putting a spotlight on different players at different times, so they feel like this is something which only their character could do, and helps get them involved. Likewise, use inspiration. I think inspiration is a tool which a lot of DMs forget about. Again, my personal rule for inspiration is that I give inspiration when players do something in line with their character, which otherwise puts them at a disadvantage for the game. So, for example, recently I had an AL game where a player was playing a lawful good paladin whose value, whose core aspiration is to help everyone who they see is in need. Sounds a little bit cliche, but I think it's fine. So this player was on an adventure and they encountered an NPC who appeared to be very, very badly hurt. But of course, the NPC is not actually very, very badly hurt. NPC is just unconscious. She would have woken up soon anyway, but of course the player and the character don't know this. So the player says, I'm going to use all my healing, my entire pool of healing for a level 3 paladin to try and restore this NPC to life. Like, bring her to consciousness and help her. So this is something which lands at a disadvantage because the module is not over yet. We're only halfway through the night. And the player uses all her healing to get this NPC back up on her feet. So the party's at a disadvantage because of this. But is it in line with her character? Yeah, it is, because that's what she said her character wants to do. It wants to really, really help the people who are in need. So one way I can reward this is by giving the player inspiration. So I hand them a token, I say, you have inspiration because I feel you're role-playing your character well, and you can use this inspiration like at some point in the rest of the night to just gain advantage on a single D20 roll. Of course, the advantage doesn't to be nothing like because she rolled a 1 and a 2. But regardless, the point is that you want to send a message to your players that they are encouraged to role play. They are encouraged to see their character as a distinct personality, which has their own likes, dislikes, needs, etc. And not just do what is optimal for the game situation as a whole. Because I think this is something that lands us to the last point as well. Flawed characters, in my personal opinion, are often the most interesting ones. And don't punish players for trying and failing. So it's this very common thing that we like to do. We see a 1 come out, then very easy, oh, your sword breaks, or your magical axe flies out of your hand, or your necklace of fireballs just has a bug and stops working, and you lose it forever. I think these are ways of punishing players, which might have a place when the players want a challenge and the players want to feel like things are really, really hardcore. But it doesn't always work, especially when you have some new players. And because this might discourage them from taking risky moves. I think the other day we were having a discussion and we mentioned how this player got hit by a trap and then spent the entire rest of the dungeon poking everything with a 10-foot pole because he didn't want to get hit by another trap. So I think one thing we can try to do, and this is probably the most difficult of all, is to make failure have interesting consequences. Don't make it just have negative consequences. Of course, failure must be negative, but you can have it be interesting. So for example, if your player is trying to deceive the king into thinking that they are, I don't know, some great wizard or something, and then they fail on the roll, one way to do it is that king says, you're lying to me. You drag them out and have them executed because they're lying to the king. Another way to do it, which might be more interesting, so to speak, that allows more room for narrative to grow, is that they lie and they are successful but not in the way they want. So they convince the king that not only are they a wizard, they're the most powerful wizard in all the land, and now the king is asking them to control the weather, which is beyond their power. And now they have to think of some way to try to carry this lie through. So trying to find interesting consequences of failure, I think, is one of the hardest things to do as a DM, but it's probably also one of the most rewarding in terms of the narrative structure for the games. Okay, so what we're going to do now, as I mentioned earlier, is we're going to pull up one of the City on the Edge modules. We're going to be looking specifically at Mission 2, which has 2 interesting parts to look at. The first part is a dinosaur race. So in case you are wondering about spoilers, you are all trying to learn to be DMs, you have to learn to play modules which you already know exactly what's going to happen. So too bad. And the second part is a jungle cage fight with magic vines and velociraptors. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull out these and look at each of them in turn. And I'd like everyone to just turn to the person or people next to you and just do a very quick discussion about what you would do, what you would change, or what you'll be looking for in these scenarios to make them more engaging for your players. You can specify a certain scenario you're thinking of. For example, you could say, I want to think of something for my group I'm already playing with. You could engage in it entirely as a hypothetical. It's up to you. We will also share what we did when running this module to make it more interesting for our players. And we just exchange some ideas about how we can go about making sure that this is something which players will enjoy, or at least maximizing the chances that they will enjoy it. Right, Marian, can we pull up the... Okay, so this module is called Grand Prize of the Oracle. It's part of City on the Edge. So can we scroll down just straight to the dinosaur race? Actually, up. Sorry. Up. Yeah, let's start from here. So at the start of this adventure, the players, this is an Adventurers League module, so it's supposed to take a total of about 2 to 3 hours. At the start of this module, the players are brought to meet this guy called Pokemon Po, who is secretly a member of the Zentarim. If you don't know who Zentarim are, they're mafia. Okay? And he wants them to take part in a dinosaur race in order to win a prize, which is actually a magical artifact which the party is looking for. The rules of the race are a bit complicated. Basically, you make a whole series of checks to can trip up or insult other people to push them behind in the race. They go to the Colosseum, they are rented juvenile Allosaurus to ride on, and they complete the race. Whether they win or they fail, the module gives you different ways of playing on from there. Alright? So, yeah?
Yeah, just to add on, okay, because this is an Adventurers League module, it's a pre-written module. So, you see these boxes here? They are box text for you to read from and kind of adapt in your own way. So, saying, when Sean was mentioning, some of you maybe are not very creative or imaginative
or don't think you are
string a sentence together without stammering, just read from this box. It has everything you need to introduce you and the players to the setting, the tone, and the atmosphere of the module itself. Okay?
just to add on to that, right, you don't exactly have to read all the time. If you're more creative kind, you know how to write, string sentences, you can create your own words, use your own lexicon, use your own vocabulary. This is just a guideline.
Okay, so I think what we'll do now is that we will start by sharing what we did for this module, just as a way of showing what kind of flexibility we have as DMs to create experiences for your players. So Marion, you want to share first what you did for the thing?
Okay.
The race.
So the dinosaur race, right? We have a couple of stuff here to consider. What Sean mentioned. So besides controlling your party, right? Your party members have to take control of dinosaurs that they're gonna race on. So there are different rules here: dash, jet, taunt, sit, and stuff. So you roll initiative, and everyone takes turn trying to race and see who goes first, right? So I didn't do much to change things up. I just made it funny for my players because I'm a guy that likes to make people laugh at their own mistakes. So I thrive on, I'm the kind of DM that thrives on ones. People roll one, I like to make it funny and exciting for them. So what I did was, for my race, but I also like to make things look like, okay, because this guy, okay, I kind of roleplay here. Pockmark Po. He's part of the Xantharium, right? His name suggests that his face is full of pockmarks. He just recovered from chicken pox or whatever, smallpox like that. So he's this very ugly, very, like a hobo kind of guy. And he breeds dinosaurs for races. But I made him like a shady kind of dinosaur breeder. Like nobody wants to take a dinosaur on for a racer. So I made him contract, basically hire the PCs to race his dinosaurs for publicity. Okay. So in short, right, in this adventure, all the dinosaurs, all the racing dinosaurs, they're kind of like painted and given like marks or logos to show what kind of team they're from. Okay. So most of these dinosaurs are professional dinosaur racers. And however, Pockmark Po is a different kind of guy. Okay, his dinosaurs are painted, but they're the most sloppy kind of fashion. You can tell that they're very sloppily painted because I describe it as such that the paint just runs off the teeth of the dinosaurs and it looks very, very sloppily done. Also, the paint is used from food like berries, bananas. You know, you watch Mr. Bean. There's an episode where he used ketchup, blue cheese, the different colors of food to use as paint, so stuff like that. So I also flavored it such that each dinosaur, they're all velociraptors, he is nicknamed after a dragon. So you have red dragon, blue dragon, green dragon, so on and so forth. And each dinosaur is painted as such, and they have the horns to represent that they are the dragons. So as you know, velociraptors do not have horns. So I made him stick like cardboard horns onto the. It's just for imagination. So you see, you got kind of some sort of imagination going on, right? I foresee you guys. Your imaginations are running already as I describe this, right? So yeah, so my players were just laughing away and trying to convince themselves that they're gonna race with this guy. So I made it funny for them. So during the race itself, just imagine a horse race. Those horse races you see on TV or whatever, right? So they start in pens. And when they run off, I make them roll initiative. And one of my players rolled a 1. So what happened is that I made his character, he started so badly, his dinosaur fell and tripped, and he rolled to the back of the pen, through like the backstage area. So he starts like, everyone's ahead already, and this guy is just way behind. So he has to do a lot of catching up. It's hilarious. So yeah, that's how I flavored my races. I didn't do much in terms of mechanics because I felt like the module itself was really well enough to warrant to be just read off like that. I just added my own flavor to make it funny and memorable for my players. So yeah, that's how I did it.
Yeah. So I mean, I was a player in that campaign. I can attest to the fact that it was pretty damn funny, especially when Marion said the last one was a pink dragon, just wearing a party hat. So.
For me personally, I tend to, as a DM, I like to focus a bit more on mechanics because D&D for me as well as being a role-playing game, it is also a game. So when you play the game, you also got to have fun as well. So for me, my party was mainly casters. So one of the first things they obviously asked was, DM, can we cast spells during this? So obviously, So obviously it was like, well, I can say no, alright, because that would be cheating per se, but that wouldn't exactly be fun. So if I say yes, however, there's the potential to go into extreme chaos where I cast Firebolt at the other guy. He falls off his horse, he's on fire. He falls off his dinosaur. I mean, I'm gonna use the horse races. But yes, so I compensated per se by saying, okay, you can cast spells for this, but you can only cast non-damaging spells. So we had a warlock. So on the first turn, he said, I'm going to cast command. I will command the other dinosaurs to stop. So the whole team on the other side were just staying there. His friends ran ahead. Yep, so that's what it is. And also with the race, there's on the way you encounter traps and stuff. So some of them can be manipulated by doing ability checks with your dinosaur, with yourself. I think it's, from my recollection, is animal handling. So you say you roll the animal handling, you get your dinosaur to jump over the pit or burst through the stack of crates. So instead, what the wizard did was, I cast Fireball. No, not Firebolt, not Fireball, he's not high level yet. So he basically just blew clean through. And yes, the crowd was booing, but it wasn't against the rules. So they did win the race, but it was a sort of a dirty win, but it was a win nonetheless, and they got a prize because technically they did not violate any rules. So yeah, there are many things you don't exactly have to stick to what's given per se. It's sometimes working with players, coming up with things on the spot. That kind of improvisation, you may make mistakes along the way, but it's okay to make mistakes. We all learn from them. So that sort of thing I find can be the most crazy fun and memorable things that you ever encounter.
So what I did personally for mine is a bit of a combination. So as I mentioned earlier, I want to try and get the players invested in it. And knowing the players who are coming for this session, I knew that they would be a bit more invested if they had a specific character they could like connect with or care for. So I tried a bit of a combination in the sense that I had also the dinosaurs which were owned by Pork Poe, but I had 7 different dinosaurs, like a young Triceratops, an old Allosaurus, a young Deinonychus for them to pick from. Each of them I had Poe tell them a little bit of the dinosaur's personality. So each of the dinosaurs had a different personality and they like different things. So in theory, mechanically, they will function differently in the race. Like for example, there was one Ankylosaurus which is very slow. So for this Ankylosaurus, I said it cannot dash because it's too slow. But because it's so stable and it's slow, it cannot be tripped up by anything. So there's no way it can be pushed backwards in the race. So then I had the characters, before they went for the race, have some time to interact with the dinosaurs and pick the one that they wanted to use in the race. So they sometimes say, so one of the players is like, I like the Triceratops because the Triceratops is a performer, the Triceratops likes attention. That's what Poe told her, the Triceratops likes attention. I am a bard with the background of performer. I also like attention, so I feel a sort of kinship with this Triceratops, and I want to try and get its attention. I want to try and allow me to ride it. But the Triceratops is damn grumpy because she rolled 2 and a 3 on an animal handling check, so you should pick another dinosaur. But in the end, the sense is that each of the players got to pick a specific dinosaur they wanted to race on, which helped them develop kind of connection with the dinosaur. So by the end of the race, they were all like, do we have to give the dinosaurs back? Can we keep them? Then before they went, they were like, I spent some of my gold to buy a treat for the dinosaur. I pat it on the head before it goes, that kind of thing. So I feel that personally was a bit of success in terms of getting players invested. It was not so much of a success in terms of the mechanics because it turned out to be quite a bit to handle. And on top of that, the rolls were so awful that everyone got hit by everything all the time anyway. At the end of each round, everyone rolls a d20 to see if you get hit by a trap, and everyone got hit by a trap every single turn after turn after turn. So yeah, the mechanics kind of ended up not being that important. But I think it was good in terms of getting players invested in the performance, in that section. So what we're going to do now, I think, is just have 5 minutes because you're running out of time for my segment, I think. Just at 5 minutes, just turn around and just discuss very briefly with each other what are some ideas you have to spice up this dinosaur race. If you are running it for players, maybe at the end of next week, what ideas do you have for how to make this more interesting and more engaging for your players? Okay? Then after that, we'll all just do a brief sharing from a few people about ideas that you thought were good. Can? Right? Can we start a discussion?
Anyone wants to go first?
Yeah, let them talk first.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's shorter than the rules. Just hover over the rules part. I think we covered the first part, right?
The rules part.
Yeah, I think as in the rules for the race. Yeah, this part. Yeah, just hover here.
Y'all form 2 rows instead.
Oh, wait, we just moved out.
Yeah, just move around so that everybody can listen. Because right now, it's a very big blank space.
That's what the fight later.
Not very good use of it.
Okay, maybe just compact inwards. Just compact inwards. Sorry about that.
Hey Sean, started at 15.
I'll just count the jump okay, fine. Count the one more day.
You want to take a break in between?
What? Do you see it's necessary, John?
Fine, no. I can go straight to mine.
Okay, do you give them like 5 minutes to use toilet or?
Yeah, 5 minute break in between. So I think my one also, I'll probably speed up more because technically homebrew everyone can decide for themselves.
You want to emphasize the Q&A.
What?
Q&A.
Yeah,
So we need for the Q&A to the end now.
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about the AL, the misconception of AL, what people usually don't want to do AL, then I'll move on to
Okay, pretty sure.
And technically, the other side of the screen here.
So the rules for all the so you can mine will be a bit chunky. Mine I will leave it.
Okay.
Mine is going to be chunky also. But I will try to speed up.
I think we see.
Got a lot of thinking to do because I got like
Can.
I think we see how it goes. Like, if the crowd is interested in certain things, we can slow down for those. Otherwise, if they are not, we speed up.
Because I think they are
more interested in things than we do.
What?
3-man weekly later.
Well, okay. In your honor, yes. How many games you running this week?
This week, I'm not sure. Maybe one on Thursday, but I have to decide. Because I'm playing on Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah. GX, Tyranny of Land. Because it's a two-parter, so.
I'm doing 4. I'm supposed to do 5. Holy, I cut down to 4. And I'm doing my two home games. So I'm not coming on Thursday. And then Saturday I'm always counting Sunday for you.
Yeah, this Saturday, right?
Saturday. And then Thursday, this year I'm running 4 games.
Wow, nice.
2 AL, 2 home games. It's gonna be fun.
How, man?
My friend just finished exam, so
Actually, do you want to speak up and try and listen in on what I say?